Hello and welcome to The Art of Aging, which is part of the Abundant Aging podcast series from United Church Homes. On this show, we look at what it means to age in America and in other places around the world with positive and empowering conversations that challenge, encourage, and inspire all to age with abundance. I'm Mike, your host, and this is part of our Aging Innovators series. I'm very, very pleased to have Sura Al-Naimi with us to talk about her work in human-centered design. Sura has an amazing history in innovation and design at a number of organizations that you know about. And last year, she partnered with United Church Homes to take human-centered design to our residents in what we called our first ever Idea-thon. And yes, we are open to new names for these. So, Sura, welcome. We are so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. I'm so happy to be here. Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful that we could carve out the time.
Awesome. Well, look, I've got to start out by asking you about your background. You know, how did you find yourself in the world? First of all, let's start with this. How would you define human-centered design?
Human-centered design. So I don't think of it as, for yourself, if you are gifting a good friend or someone that you know really well, you would be able to gift them something for maybe $5 or $10. And it would be very insightful, be very impactful. And they would, oh my gosh, you really just kind of get me, you know? And so human-centered design is kind of that sensibility of we're creating something that really meets somebody's need, maybe a need that they didn't even know that they had. And we're designing something that's just really spot on. So it doesn't have to be sparkly or very tech infused, although it can be. But really, it's filling a gap that meets the person's belief system or moving through the world. And to put it really simply, if your best friend could buy you something for $5 and just get you, it's that kind of sensibility that we're bringing when we're designing and creating.
I love the idea of bringing the perfect gift to somebody, because what goes through my mind is empathy. What goes through my mind is really just a clear understanding of wants and needs, and it's sort of like people talk about the golden rule about treating others as you would like to be treated. This reminds me of the platinum rule, which is treating people as they would like to be treated, and that takes that understanding. How did you find yourself in this world?
So my background is in psychology and I love creativity. And I really stumbled into it by accident through a series of conversations, through being curious. And somebody described this workplace where you would get to bounce around between different industries and meet different people and learn new things. And I said, sign me up. And so as a young grasshopper in London, that's where I started off at an innovation company called What If in London. And so that's how I really kicked it off by a happy accident, but also just kind of knowing that, being open to new experiences, being perpetually curious and wanting to learn, and wanting to figure out how can we understand something and then creatively, make something from that place. That was the driver. So yeah, London was the best place in it for me. And then I came to the States just to work with a startup. And as you'd know it, I was employee number two for luxury jewelry. And then after that, car dealers, because of course the two go so well together, Right, yeah. And then I did it all into, a small company that some people might know, Disney, here in Orlando, Florida. And so I think that's what I love about this skill set and this mindset is that it perpetuates from startups to, Fortune 10s to, your personal life to your work life. It has that elasticity to provide value in so many situations.
Yeah, and I apologize because I know that we prepared some questions ahead of time, but what kind of goes through my head right now is when you think about that experience. I mean, think about you've kind of evolved an approach, and we're going to talk about the approach that we use for human-centered design now. But I'm wondering if there were any kind of moments of joy or discovery when you're kind of talking with customers or designing something for them, where you just felt that the approach of this empathetic co-creation with customers or this discovery, was there a point in your career where that kind of clicked for you and you said, oh wow, there's something here?
Yes. I think from the very beginning, really, I think that's what drove me because instead of, I think that looking at reports is great. And I think they serve such a massive value in the world. But being able to sit with somebody and, sit in their homes, for example, in Disney, we would actually go and sit in people's homes and actually get to be a part of their family and have dinners with them. And that's kind of an interaction that goes beyond, bullet 9 on page 54. And so with that, there's a visceral um experience that happens where when you're creating a solution, you can go, oh, well, Angela would really like this, or oh no, like remember her daughter said this was important. So we need to make sure that we bake this into the solution. And so I think that kind of interaction is kind of going back to that best friend analogy. How can we create for people that are not our aunts, so how can we not make assumptions, but really spend the time with individuals, getting to know them in that way? And that's where I think things really click into place. And the other thing that's really exciting for me is being able to take a team together to do that, because then all of a sudden when we're creating together, everybody just kind of gets it, whether you're in marketing or sales or operations, all of a sudden everybody understands the Hispanic audience and they're just kind of rallying together, and they're ambassadors for the solutions that are created. So I think that kind of course corrects, making something that looks cool, but really like nobody's actually wanting it.
Yeah, and it seems pretty intimidating, when you're talking about, getting people together and launching a product and really just finding a place to start with it. And it's I don't know, a couple of things are going through my head here, but when we're talking about really where we go with design and design thinking, um, is it a myth? These don't need to be complex things, right? I mean, I know these are kind of trendy, fancy terms, but yeah, I can think of a situation that I had where I, was trying to understand how older people have their relationship with technology. And I can read articles and I could sort of talk
Right.
to people about it. And then my mom had trouble with her computer, and I went with her to Best Buy to the Geek Squad counter, and we were waiting for about 40 or 45 minutes for someone to to take care of her. But I was observing every other person in line, and that told me just tons about older people and their relationships with technology. So when I think about human-centered design, I'm thinking about the grand concept, but I'm also thinking about, I don't know, simple experiments. Is that kind of a right way to think about it?
I love that so much. Like, yes, I feel like the more that I or other people can feel that it's within our grasp, that it's something that could be done in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, could be a a friend, could be just going to a park and observing. We have access to so much human centered design. It's essentially watching humans, talking to humans, stepping into their shoes. And while we can do really big projects and consumeristic projects, and again, those definitely have a role in the world, I think we can all be sort of empowered to go have these experiments, think about where our audience might be, and then go hang out there. You ask a friend to recommend a friend to chat to for 10 to 15 minutes to get a fresh perspective, without needing the witness, just having a conversation as we do. And so I think the things that we naturally do as humans at a dinner party, or just kind of on a day off, could equally be applied to any project that we're facing.
And there's a certain amount of kind of just relaxing and letting things go here, right? I mean, you're not having an agenda. You're just letting the experience kind of drive the insights and just kind of going with the flow, I guess, right?
Exactly right. So if we're kind of out there, already with an assumption in our mind, and then seeking to validate that assumption, then that's just kind of that's one state of being. But then it doesn't allow us to discover new things, you know. Whereas if I'm not attached to an outcome, and I'm, having a discussion with somebody and genuinely being curious about their world, I think it's a very different place to kind of step into. My favorite experiences are those 5 a.m. Uber runs because I meet the most unusual people. Usually, I don't retired, they tell me their life story in the space of 20 minutes. I'm totally enamored and in awe. and leaving kind of like ready to get on my plane. Those are the kind of experiences that, at the time you might not know, like, oh, how am I going to use this from a human-centered design project? But these are all kind of new fodder and new stimulus that we can apply at some point in the future. And then there's the intentional excursions that you kind of mentioned that, if we know that we have an elderly audience, going to Best Buy and seeing, how they're interacting or what's happening for them, that speaks volumes beyond, reading a report and, being very much more sort of analytical, non-emotional mind.
Yeah, I know that this to our listeners may seem a little bit loosey goosey, but I just want to kind of draw a comparison here between, how I would at least have done, product design in the past and what we're talking about now. In the past we would have talked about, here's a product that we think is really interesting, and let's go out and do research. We'll do focus groups and market exercises and things like that, and see if people like the idea. Um, but what occurs to me, and I want to draw back to a podcast we did with Deval Patel of Lotus, formerly of Apple, where he said, and I think that a lot of entrepreneurs may be at risk for this when they have a great idea and they really think it's a good one. But he said, how do you fall in love with the problem versus the solution first? Fall in love with the problem or fall in love with the opportunity. And it's that kind of analogy of falling in love, means, you sort of, it's all about kind of trying to maybe live the experience or walk a mile in the person's shoes, or really try to get to that. And he said, until the points at which all the stories start overlapping. Does that kind of ring true for you?
Yes, that really deeply resonates. It's really spending the time, setting the context of what's going on. So I think if you think of yourself as, the world's leading investigator, whether it's, Sherlock Holmes or maybe it's your mother or, whoever it is, you're curious, what is that alter ego? And then really doing that exploration. So, a lot of the time I use the metaphor of the six blind men who are describing an object, and one is saying, this feels like a sturdy wall, and the other one says, this feels like a snake. The other one says, this feels like, the texture of rope. And after a while, it's revealed that they're all touching the same object, which is an elephant, but from different perspectives. And so as I begin a project, how can we see your perspectives, because each one is so equally valid so that we can see the whole picture. And then from that place, be able to create something that's meaningful within that landscape.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get into our question set, but that also spurs another thought with me, and it's something that you've taught us, and everybody. And I think this actually leads into this next question, because I think that our listeners may feel that, oh my goodness, I'm not a creative person. I'm not I don't know if I could really just go out and talk to somebody and then what that sort of thing. And we take it, we take a team-based approach at United Church Homes. And the first thing, I think, when you started doing training with us, the first thing that you did is you had us kind of go through an exercise of analyzing the style in which we innovate, or the style in which we create. And we all had different styles. And I think that one of the things you shared is, like, if first of all, anybody can do this, I think is what you had said. And that if you want to solve a problem quickly, you might put people of the same types together and they can do it. But if you really want to attack and come up with innovative and unique approaches, if you really want to understand problems and opportunities, then diversity is kind of a key. Putting different sorts of people together, just like the elephant analogy, right? Because everyone has a different piece of information or a different perspective, and then together they all kind of see the elephant, right?
Exactly right, Mike. Exactly right. I love to think about it in terms of superhero powers. So if you think about any movie or any example that you might have that comes to mind, there's always distinct roles within a superhero team, and each one is bringing that to the table. And only together are they able to kind of like go through that hero's journey and achieve what they want to achieve. And it's sort of the same thing with projects. It's like, sometimes we might identify a specific skill set as being the creative one, perhaps the ability to ideate and, pattern build and come up with those wacky abstract ideas, right? But what we really reveal is that there are specific skill sets and they run through the innovation process. And each is equally important to drive innovation out the door or to have a successful project. And so there's, we talked a lot about just now about, falling in love with the problem. That would be the role of the clarifier, the person who doesn't make assumptions, is reading yet another research paper and having a talk to just yet another person, right? And so that's so critical for setting the foundation and the stage and the opportunity for the project. Then, there's the ideator who sometimes people think that's the classic creative, right? The wacky one who's like, why don't we, have cars magically appear? And you can get into a stranger's car and you're like, no, that's not safe. That's not safe. Because at that time it's so abstract and it's never existed before. But then, there's other skill sets like the developer who takes something and is kind of weighing up the options, making it workable, making sure that it functions and tweaking it. And then finally, there's that Nike just do it person, the person who's always in the meeting, who's kind of ready to jump into action. Let's get this out into the door. Let's get something tangible there. And without any one of these, we would be stuck and we would either not have a product or an experience into market, or be something that just, wasn't really a fit. And I think that's the thing is that we can do it in terms of diversity, in terms of individuals, but we can also cultivate it within ourselves in terms of you think about going to the gym and getting those muscle reps. Some of your muscles might be a bit flabby. So, for example, if your clarifier is a bit flabby, let's make sure that you're spending a bit of time in a project at the beginning to really understand what's going on, and so on and so forth. So, I love that, these are skills that we can cultivate, but these are also skills that we can spot in the wild with others and say, you seem to have a real appetite for getting, so implementing, for taking these. I really love doing the research bit. Can we buddy up on this so that we can be really successful?
And so I just so the four different types: an ideator, a clarifier. Sorry, give me the other two.
Now, a developer and an
Mhm.
implementer.
Developer and implementer. So ideation, clarification, development, and so
Implementation.
forth. Implementer. Okay. And for our listeners, is there a reference you can point them to if they want to kind of go on the internet and find us?
Yeah, absolutely. If they go and have a look at Foresight, the number 4 site, that goes through the different types. And then also if they want to have an individual assessment or team assessment, that's something that I can run them through as well. But they can go geek out there and see if they can guess themselves and others. But then if they actually want to see what their preferences is, so like, sciencey way backed by 65 years of research, then we can do that together as well.
All right. And shout out to HiHelloSura.com, which is your site, so people can check you out there. But I can also, so I can imagine this that, I've got the crazy ideas and the clarifier is like, wait, can I hear this? Can we kind of put this more to shape? And then the developer is like, okay, let's workshop this a little bit. And then the implementer is like, okay, this is how we can put this into action. And so we're talking about ideas and we're talking about a system to develop those ideas. But I think it's first worth noting that in order for this to work, we have to get into this mindset that no idea is bad. And that may sound kind of crazy to people, right? Can you talk a little bit about kind of, like, and we'll get into improv comedy here. Can you talk a little bit about the yes and principle?
Yes, and exactly right. Yeah. So a lot of the time when an idea is fresh, it's going to seem a bit crazy. I talked about the example that, listeners probably identify as Uber, right? At the beginning, it seemed a little bit crazy. So, but we don't
What do you
know.
mean?
But
We're like, I'm going to get into a stranger's car and they're going to drive me around and I'm not going to get murdered.
exactly right. Where I'm going to sleep on a stranger's couch, and I'm going to wake up alive, and I've got a good experience, with Airbnb. And so with that, the metaphor that really comes to mind is that of, if I have two seeds in my hands and I say to you, which one is an acorn and which one is a weed, the easiest way to find out whether the seed is going to grow into a mighty tree or going to be a weed is to nurture it and to cultivate it. There's no other way to know. And so ideas are exactly the same way. And, we want to cultivate and nurture these ideas to see what their potential is, you know, and we need to give that some time and some space. And a lot of the time people are resistant. And one of the ways to do that you did mention is, borrowed from the world of improv, which is using the language of yes versus, in other instances, if we're not really sure about something, we'll say, no, that won't work because, budget, we did it before, etc. Or, sometimes people have another resistance by saying yes, or we could, go flying, or they'll mention something completely different that's not growing the idea. And so giving the time to grow the idea, one, that we get past the low hanging fruit and we can really see the potential of what this thing can be. And then two, people confuse nurturing an idea with green lighting an idea. They think that if they're giving it some love and some attention and some nurturing, it means that they're saying, okay, I'm going to allocate budget to this, or it means I'm going to be personally responsible for putting this out to the market. And that can be really scary to people. And so there is a distinction in activities that just because you're nurturing something doesn't mean that you're saying okay to it.
That's really important because I think in the environment that we're creating, and I love the flower versus seed analogy because if you have a bunch of seeds, you know seeds meaning ideas, plant them until they start to grow, and then as soon as one is a weed, we have to pluck it and remove it, right? So every idea has to get some sort of a chance, and I think there's also a concept here about intent, right? I think that one of the exercises that I really like is the exercise of putting a crazy idea in front of a group and using the SN principle, right? So um, you know, what if we were to take a big slingshot and slingshot to work, or what if we put seats on the wing of an airplane, or what if we had invisible clothing, or what if we have if we talk about something like, oh, seats on the wings of an airplane, it's a terrible idea, awful idea. But what would you say the intent behind that idea might be?
Right. I mean, following the intent could be fresh air, additional room to sort of spread your legs and be comfortable. A ringside view of nature. So those could all be potential benefits. And then within that, you could say, okay, well, how might you bake that into the existing system of the plane? Or how might you provide brand new experiences that enable you to do that? So you
Right. So
take
if you ever, yeah. So if you have a work colleague come to you and say, "Hey, let's put the wings on the seats of an airplane," I mean, we could do the yes and thing and say, "Oh, yes," and we could put magazines there, or yes, and we could put parachute, or yes, and. But but what's the intent of the idea? The intent of the idea is it to make air travel more fun, to make air travel more exciting, to make air travel more. So I guess once the conversation turns to that, it's a whole new conversation, right?
it's a whole new conversation because we're uncovering a different need state or a different intent and motivation. And from that different place, then we can open it up to other experiences or other creations, So just because, technically speaking, sitting on the wings of a plane, maybe that's a bit dangerous. But to your point, if we could make air travel more fun, what are some of the experiences that we could bake in before you get on the plane, your arrival, while you're on there, uh, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, and I just want to kind of go back and review the steps of at least our human-centered design process with our listeners, because I want to kind of get to the next stage, which is kind of like, now that you have ideas, how do you choose them, right? But what we've talked about, sort of, falling in love with a problem or an opportunity. So if somebody has an idea, what's the intent? And then, does it lead to a problem? Falling in love with that, and some techniques to do so: observational, talking with people, talking with stakeholders until their stories repeat themselves, really kind of getting a good sense of those insights. After you've identified the problem or opportunity, then put a diverse group of people together in a room, and then sets the stage for it, maybe through some fun exercises like tossing out crazy ideas and using an yes and type philosophy to not discount them, but maybe to expand on them a little bit more, talking about the intent behind the ideas. And then we kind of get into the actual ideation around that problem or opportunity. And from what we've done in the past, I mean, the thing that was really kind of striking to me, and what I didn't really understand at first, is that, and I'm going to go back to the ideathon that we did with our residents last year. We put a diverse group of residents, ages 65 to 99, in a room for 2 days at our community in Parkview, in Upper Sandusky, Ohio. And we gave them a challenge. What would $1,000 do to enhance resident life at Parkview? And the resident, what was interesting was the residents first said, "Well, I don't know. I live in the cottage, and I don't know if my needs are the same as as the assisted living people and all that." But we got them together. We did some icebreakers. We asked them to, pair them up. They talked to each other. We asked the partner to introduce the other person to the room. We sort of broke the ice that way. Everyone kind of came with ideas about what that $1,000 could do. And we all wrote them down and we sort of documented them. We drew pictures around them. But then it went to a next level that I didn't expect. And I thought it was a waste of time at first, but it was something where we said, okay, we're going to pretend that Oprah lives at Parkview. We're going to
Right.
pretend that Jay Leno lives at Parkview. We're going to pretend that the Beatles or Pat Sajak and Vanna White live at Parkview. And what ideas or what could they bring to the table at Parkview? And then it was like this. It was really kind of abstract. But can you speak to that? I mean, why did we do that?
Yes, exactly. Because I think that at the beginning, we've got our ideas and then the low hanging fruit. So they're the ones that we know and love and have cherished and kind of nurtured for a little bit of time. But they are probably the obvious ones. And a lot of the times we're looking to push the thinking, we need to push the spectrum of thinking, which means that we need to kind of get more into the world of analogy or the world of metaphor, where things don't quite make sense. Because we use analogies and metaphors, just as we talked about, wings sitting on the wing of a plane. We use that to express things that don't yet exist, right? And that's the only way that we can kind of build a bridge into this new world. So the reason that we went there, what if Oprah was designing something, is that it's pushing the thinking into a new realm that we might not have considered before. And then from there, we can kind of take the seed or the nugget or the intent and go, okay, what does that really mean? What would it really mean if Oprah was there? Is there like a bountiful experiences? Is well-being enhanced? What is it that is really at the root that's driving this idea behind Oprah presenting? So all that, and like we're breaking our rigorous thinking. We have a huge expertise of thinking in a certain way. So how can we break that rigorous thinking, jump out of it in a way? And these kind of exercises enable us to do that because we're creatures of habit to create that expertise. And so we need these kind of activities to introduce something that at first seems kind of wild, but later on you'll go, okay, well, I see what's going on here. And I can use if you're cooking, you've got that reduction sauce, right? What's the essence of what's here? I can use
Yes.
that to create something new. And that's really the driver behind any of these lateral thinking. What you're talking about is a lateral thinking activity. There's so many lateral thinking activities. They're available everywhere. There's a variety. And the core intent is to get us thinking in new ways so that, very much like cooking, you cook with the same ingredients, the food is going to taste the same. If you introduce suddenly this new spice or this new vegetable, all of a sudden things are different, right? So how can we do that with our ideation process so that we're not just making incremental changes, maybe we're making something that's really going to take a situation into leaps and bounds into the future.
Yeah, and what I liked about the exercise that we did with our residents at Parkview was that we came up with so many of these ideas, and first of all, some of the ideas were really quickly actionable. I mean, one of the we should fix the player piano, and it turned out we just didn't know how to turn on the player piano, so that
Right.
was fine. That was good, but I love I loved how we sort of took all those ideas and we kind of found themes within them. Between all of the residents sort of coming up with ideas of what could benefit them, what they could own. And by the way, for the listeners, this would not be something that staff would do. This would be something that residents would lead themselves. I mean, I just gave them $1,000 and they just sort of took off with it. And so when we sort of looked through all those ideas, it's kind of like we could group the ideas together into even larger themes. And I'm thinking about an example where somebody wanted to get outdoor lights and somebody wanted to have a pollinator garden. Somebody wanted to improve the picnic area. And we sort of grouped that into a bigger idea about sort of environmentalism and really being good stewards and sort of putting our act and then another one around music and musicality and another one around fitness and exercise and balance. So ideation, consolidation, but then we had to get into some more, we had to start cutting those ideas. We had to start really kind of driving them down. And I know that and that means constraints. And we already had a constraint with $1,000. We already had a constraint with the resident run. It has to be resident run and also benefiting everybody at Parkview. But can you talk a little bit about, I mean, if we call the first part kind of really expansive thinking, can we, and just your analogy, maybe in a different way, but reduction, how can we talk about maybe more reductive thinking? Kind of really getting down to something that's tangible, where the practical minded side comes in, and we actually think about ideas that are maybe more feasible.
Yes, absolutely. I think reductive or constraints are, really the moment for inception of new things. So they're absolutely really beautiful. So yeah, when we had the ideas, we put them against the lens of our success criteria, right? So we'd already identified at the beginning, you know, how do we know if we're successful? Well, these 5 things need to happen in order for us to know that we're successful. So we mapped each idea alongside the success criteria, and we were very quickly and visually, sort of like a spider brand, if you will, able to see how an idea is performing. Ideas can often be very subjective and very emotion fueled, and that's really great. We had a vote of that, looked at sort of where is the passion of the room, where are people really excited, and that's very important as well. But then, how do we have an objective conversation about these ideas and how they're performing, especially when they're new? We map them against the success criteria. And then from there, we're able to see, wow, this one is performing really well against these 3, but is a little weak on these 2. This one it has a big surface area. This one has a really tiny surface area. So all of a sudden, you're able to prioritize your ideas, number one. And number 2, with the ones that you prioritize, we're able to see where there are additional opportunities to bolster them and to grow them, and capture them. Because you want to kind of like, you're thinking about them as like, well, newborns, if you will, and you want to make sure that you're arming them, giving them all the padding so that they can kind of survive in the wild, right? And so if we know, for example, that the rollout is going to take 10 years and we want our rollout to happen in a year, how can we adjust this idea so that the rollout is faster?
Yeah. So for our listeners, we call this a stargazer exercise. And imagine that you'll come up with any number of criteria that the idea needs to kind of measured against. So in our case, has to cost $1,000 or less, resident run, has to benefit as many residents as possible, must be executed within a year. There's something else, but so if we, people will kind of, rate the ideas based upon that. And we sort of, something could be like, a 1 or 2 or a 3, and you kind of add them up and the points kind of get you to the best part. But if you had an idea that everybody liked, and maybe it's limiting on, I don't know, time to roll it as you outlined. I'm still new to this. So then you go back and you say, okay, this is a great idea, but it has this constraint that's really struggling. But can we modify the idea that it can happen in less time or cost less money or things like that? I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. And so I want to, we're coming to the end, but I just wanted to kind of, just for you and for the audience, kind of maybe just relay the process that we're using again. I'm learning too. So this is what we call our teach back thing. I'm trying to teach back here. All right. So fall in love with the problem, observational conversations, interviews, talk to the people you aim to serve, the story up into the point where the stories really overlap. Okay, you got a good sense. Define the problem or opportunity, put a diverse group together, set the stage through fun exercises that sort of get that no or yes but or yes or into a yes and type thing when people come up with ideas. Understand the intent behind the ideas, expansive thinking, grouping into themes, reductive thinking using the Stargazer exercise. And then, and for the audience, when we did this with our residents, and we're going to be doing more of this, we think that resident run programming in this way is really sustainable. And they came up with three great ideas. They came up with outdoor life, they came up with music and musicality, they came up with exercise and balance. And they bought a karaoke machine. They're getting really fun cognitive, like brain games and exercise things coming together. But they put $1,000 toward it, which is what was really interesting, that what they spent the money on was really symbolic. That it, they, the karaoke machine is a representation of what musical life means at Parkview, and that the $1,000 that they spent on the initial part of the gardens, they use that to raise an additional $40,000 for outdoor enhancement. And I just think that these little seeds can grow, and so we think that there's something there, and you're helping us, and just feel so thankful for that. But for anybody here that really wants to maybe be inspired by that process, and by the way, we're both from the Commonwealth, so we use process, not process. So apologies to the audience in the United States. Um, if you, where could people go to maybe learn more about this methodology? HiHelloSura.com. Obviously, they can find you there.
Yes.
Um, where else do you think that might be a good resource for people that want to adopt their own programs?
Absolutely. I think that so obviously HiHelloSura, and that has a slew of articles and podcasts that go on, which also we interviewed the residents that were part of the ideathon. So they're able to share their
Right.
perspective
Yeah, you do that. That's right. You do have a series on that. That's correct.
and well into yourself. But then also, there are some great resources out in the wild, like IDEO is wonderful. They have such great snapshots of the process. There's a great book called Sticky Wisdom that was written by What If, and that's like, you could read that in the evening. It's really great. There's another great book called How Stella Saved the Farm, and that's a fable that is based on an innovation book, but they turned it into a fable where a goat was bringing, a new industry of llamas. And how does she do that? Because the llamas are so outlandish and they're so new. So I would say those are absolutely great resources to kind of get a little bit stuck in and kind of whet the appetite for this. And the other thing that I would say is that there's so much out there. So just take little bites and start applying immediately. That's what I've seen, is that when people, for example, get a concept like, yes, and they're like, yeah, I get that. Like, it's so simple. But then all of a sudden they start using it in meetings when initially they want to shut down something a co-worker is saying, or all of a sudden they're using that with their teenager to really hear what the teenager is actually expressing. And so the thread becomes embedded and it becomes more habitual. So while we can kind of get really immersed into all these different resources, it can sometimes be a bit overwhelming. So just a little bit at a time will go a long way.
And I also like the idea of maybe some just activities people can do just to start small again, just to put themselves into this creative. Brush your teeth with your other hand, read a different magazine, listen to a different podcast. Of course, but this podcast should be the one that people listen to first.
Absolutely.
Find another way to work. I love the story of the London transit strike from maybe 10 years ago, where the entire system went on strike and everyone had to find a new way to work. And after the strike was over, 10% of the people kept the new way because, it was more, there was something new out there that was better, and they just never discovered it yet. So take that new way to work, read that new magazine, talk to someone that you've never talked to before. I mean, these are all little things that can spur creativity. But before we come to the end of our podcast, three quick questions for you, sir, if you'll allow me. We always ask our guests these three questions. And so it's about aging. All right.
Yes.
So is it okay if I ask these of you?
Please do.
Okay. All right. So when you think about how you've aged, question number one, what do you think has changed about you or grown with you that you really like about yourself?
What a great question. I think that I think my desire for my own company is something that I really enjoy about myself. So I would usually go out there and be looking for the next sparkly new thing, and kind of feel a bit sort of not satisfied. But then I realized that all the sparkly things were already within myself. So now I'm really enjoying it, which is great. So I think that's a massive shift since my 20s, and really more something that's been coming into its own over just really the last couple of years.
Oh man, discovering your own richness inside yourself. That's wonderful. And okay, so question number two. What has surprised you the most about how you get about what has surprised you the most about you as you've aged?
What has surprised me the most? I think I always consider myself to be a very extroverted individual. And now I'm really discovering a love for listening and observing and taking things in. So I wouldn't have guessed that from younger Sura.
Yeah, yeah. I know I've always I'm so excited. I always like to talk, but I mean that's something I want to do is really get that listening. That's great. Even as a podcast host, that's important. Okay,
Exactly.
right. Okay, so number three, is there someone that you've met or been in your life that has set a good example for you in aging? So someone that has maybe, as we call our series, somebody that's inspired you to age with abundance.
Okay, this is so easy for me to answer because I think that Catherine and I think her husband's name is David, who were
Oh,
part of the
from Parkview.
yeah, who were part of the ideathon, literally my ambassadors for how I want to age. So, they know all about blue living, so the tenets of having a good life. They're doing their gardening masterclass, they've done their purpose workshops, they sing, their life is just so full and meaningful and connected to community. So I mean that's definitely my kind of bastions, future aging,
Oh yeah, they just love life and they engage it and as we say and with the theme of abundant aging, I mean there's so much richness to life as you age. Even if your physical self is disappointing you, this might be the time you might be most creative or engaging, and we want to give everyone everywhere more chance to experience that joy. And I really love the answer to that question, Sarah. And I think those guys, that couple is amazing. So thank you. And then that means we're actually coming to the end of this one. We're coming to the end of this episode of The Art of Aging, Aging Innovators, part of the Abundant Aging podcast series, which is from United Church Homes. And we want to hear from you. What's changed about you as you've aged that you love? What has surprised you the most? How do you define abundant aging? Who's your abundant aging hero? And what do you think of this concept of human-centered design? Would you like to use it in your own life? And of course, go to abundantagingpodcast.com to share your thoughts. And please like, share, subscribe, abundantagingpodcast.com. You can also find us on YouTube under United Church Homes. Please subscribe to that. You'll get more great content, including our Ask a Naviguide series. Sura, again, where can people find you?
Yes, they can find me at HiHelloSura.com, and I release a lot of content of top tips on Instagram. And again, that's HiHelloSura or Sura Al-Naimi on LinkedIn.
All right. HiHelloSura, SURA. Great. Well, thank you so much for being there. Thank you to our listeners for listening to this podcast. And we hope to deliver you more great content in the future. Thank you so much. See you next time.